Hello, this is Aaron West. I am the author of the A24 New Wave. In this book, I look at A24's output and I make the argument that we are in a new wave movement right now. A24 plays a major role. This book has a supplemental podcast where each episode is a brief conversation about an A24 related topic, whether an actor, director, or even a genre. As I continue research for the book and conduct interviews, I expect to record podcast episodes with people involved with the company. You can find the podcast at cinejourneys.com or wherever you find podcasts, and we are proud to be members of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Have you ever wanted to dive deeper into the horror movies you love? Beyond the Blood is a horror podcast for fans who want more than just surface-level screams. We do deep dives into the movies that shaped us, digging into director commentaries, behind-the-scenes stories, deleted scenes, and the special features that most people skip. Each episode is a love letter to the genre. We break down how these films were made, the creative risks that paid off or didn't, and the lasting impact they've had on the genre as a whole. From 70s slashers to modern nightmares, we celebrate the craft, chaos, and characters that keep us coming back. If you're the kind of fan who rewatches movies with the commentary on, or you simply grew up in the video store horror aisle, the Beyond the Blood podcast was made for you. New episodes every single week. Subscribe, and let's dig deep. Welcome to the Beyond the Blood podcast.
We're in Wave Media. Welcome back, Midnight viewers, to Father Malone's Weekly Roundup. I'm Father Malone, and with me, infected with pure cuteness. The cute virus. It's Ripley Jean. No, you don't understand. A pug becoming vicious only adds to the cuteness. Even with a knife. Ow! Okay, the fucking world is on fire, everybody. So let's take a look at some dystopia. More specifically, it's the dystopia everyone's talking about. Actually, no. They're not talking about post-apocalypse, they're talking about zombie dong. And we will too, I suppose, since everyone is a fucking 14-year-old girl when it comes to on-screen penis. We are looking at 28 years later, but we'll get there after some days and some weeks. It's the Danny Boyle, Alex Garland. Wait, no, it's not them anymore. Wait, they're back. The series has gone from shitty DV camera to high-quality 35mm back to fucking iPhones. Before we get there, a quick, annoying autobiographical pause. Now, I've told this story over on the Projection Booth podcast, and you should head over there for a more in-depth analysis of this film, but see, in 1982, I was consumed with Creepshow mania. I read and reread that comic, I listened to the soundtrack obsessively, and I sought out any tangential material related to Creepshow. That's how I ended up convincing my mother to rent The Ripper, the shot-on-videotape nightmare starring FX guru Tom Savini. What a boondoggle. A hornswoggle, that was. But the holy grail, the one I just could not find in any fashion, was the film that George Romero had made a few years prior. A film my older, irresponsible cousins would talk about in whispers. Dawn of the Dead. A film my cousin Susan expressly forbade her husband from taking me to see, which he did at the first opportunity, and it fucked my head up. Sincerely. The human in the movie theater seat when the lights went down was not the same one when the gonk came flouncing across the soundtrack 2 hours later. Suddenly, vampires and ghosts and Frankensteins and witches and everything I'd come to know as scary took a fucking backseat to the ultimate monster. Us. 'Cause what are zombies but our loved ones and our friends, back from the dead and just vacant? all animal instinct and animal hunger. It's not hard to remember just how horrifying a concept that is, even after the last 25 years of non-stop zombie everything in entertainment. That wasn't always the case. Prior to 2001, the number of zombie films totals about 70, give or take. Since then, over 500. That doesn't count novels and comic books and TV shows and lunchboxes and plush toys. So what was the spark? Who, if it wasn't Billy Joel, actually started the fire? Most horror folk, and film folk for that matter, tend to point the decaying finger in the direction of 28 Days Later, and it's easy to understand why. Here was a thoughtful, dare I say, art house take on the zombie menace. Those art house bona fides are provided by Danny Boyle. I'd say Alex Garland as well, but when 28 Days Later was released, he was just the guy who wrote the book that Boyle had made into that disastrous DiCaprio flick, The Beach. Boyle, on the other hand, was an indie darling. He still is, despite working in every strata of the industry imaginable. Incidentally, I think there's a divide that can be drawn for cinephiles about 90s movies. I have a theory you were either wowed by Pulp Fiction or Trainspotting. I'm not trying to make a Beatles-Stones feud or anything, but Trainspotting is the clear winner there. Suck it, all you goons with your Uma Thurman posters on your dorm room walls. Anyway, if the guy who made Trainspotting was taking the undead seriously, then I guess we all had better too. I like a lot of 28 Days Later, and I do think it managed to inspire a lot of measured re-examination of horror and its impact, while giving a proper introduction to the greater populace of a proud member of the monster family that had been all but ignored up until then. But the film is not prescient. It didn't predict a goddamn thing. It is a thoughtful meditation on the times it was created, but it's cobbled together from other horror pieces. More specifically, 28 Days Later is George Romero's zombie trilogy and a few of his other films used for parts, with a thin layer of Day of the Triffids at the outset. Like that movie, our hero awakens after a lengthy hospital stay to find the entire world changed by a horrible invasion and has to figure out the where and the what and the how while evading this new threat. That's the end of the Day of the Triffids. Then it's all zombies. Although they're not, because zombies are dead, by fucking definition. These are living, breathing folks who've been infected by a virus. So after some harrowing, though fairly rollicking adventures, our heroes form a family and try to live the old way and are forced to move on, and then they're splintered apart again and again by the threat of these creatures. And in the end, they run to what's left of civilization, which is the military, who are so fucking degenerate that the only way to any sort of safety is by embracing these zombies as your ally. If that's not Night and Dawn and Day of the Dead, then, well, it just fucking is. There's no two ways about it. Also, stop using rape as a fucking plot point, okay? The fact that there would be a pandemic 20 years after the film does not make the film a fucking prophecy. The idea of rage-filled humans triggered that way by a virus is straight from Romero's pre-Dawn of the Dead flick, The Crazies. They remade that a decade ago with Timothy Olyphant, which was pretty damn good. Anyway, the virus is also from Romero. Now, the virus being one of rage, that's pure Alex Garland. That's the innovation. That's the relevant commentary they've added to the zombie equation. Since they're not dead and they're not zombies, by the way, the fast zombie, slow zombie debate here is moot. This isn't Romero's sandbox that these movies are playing in, so the ghouls can behave however you want. And the fucking fact of the matter is, this movie did in no way create fast zombies. Do I need to say that again? I think I do, because I was fucking shocked to hear Alex Garland and The Interviewer and at least a dozen other so-called horror podcasters talking about this subject and having only a passing familiarity with Return of the Living Dead. Those are zombies. They run. They are, in fact, the scariest zombies ever committed to celluloid. I'd take 2 shopping malls of Romero zombies to 1 or 2 O'Bannon zombies in an empty field. Easy. But people talk about Return of the Living Dead very casually, like, oh, there was a punk rock movie with zombies. Nah, fuck you. You're talking about a movie that is 1,000% better than any zombie entertainment you'd put on a top 10 list. Not you, listener. You're one of the good ones. I'm talking about these other horror hacks. I'm no gatekeeper, but know your fucking history. Otherwise, we're all going to end up in trouble. Too late. And by the way, it wasn't as if there was nothing at all going on in Zombie Town by the time 28 Days Later hit theaters. In 1996, Capcom released Resident Evil on the PlayStation. While that game eventually involves straight-up monsters, the main antagonist, the one terrorizing a whole new generation and thus prepping them for what's to come, was the zombie. I don't think the follow-up to 28 Days Later quite gets the love it deserves. 28 Weeks Later is really an Alien versus Aliens scenario. At least it would be if Alien had been shot on a fucking camcorder. That's another aspect of 28 Days Later I gotta mention. It looks like garbage. Yeah, they saved so much money and it allowed for all this kind of innovation and blah, blah, blah. It looks like shit. I do not buy the CCTV camera angle. Obviously, I'd prefer to have a terrible video-looking movie than none at all, but come on. Does anyone actually love the look of this film? Now, 28 weeks later, Boyle and Garland were off making the wildly underrated film Sunshine. That's a flick we'll definitely be covering at some point. I think it's Boyle's best film. That's right, better than Trainspotting. In their stead, they hired Intacto director Juan Carlos Fresnadillo. The film takes place, 28 weeks later. The infected have been starved and or eradicated, and U.S. forces are in control of London and are reconstructing while former residents, having been abroad or fled during the outbreak, are being resettled into the country. Listen, I should have said at the top that this is going to get real spoilery. I consider 28 days and 28 weeks to be fair game. They're 23 and 18 years old at this point. When we get to 28 years later, I'll do a spoiler-free section, and then I'm going to warn you because there's no way I can talk about that film without spilling some of the beans. The opening scene of 28 Weeks Later is truly fucking horrifying. A husband and wife are holed up with a dozen other survivors. They're set upon by the infected, and Robert Carlyle, our hero, panics and runs, leaving his wife, Catherine McCormick, and a small boy in the house with the infected while he runs and runs and runs. It's fucked. And then he's one of the families being relocated as he's being reunited with his children who were abroad during the outbreak. And then the wife shows up alive. Holy fuck. Now that's a dynamic to play against a backdrop of rage-infected chaos. And Harold Perrineau from Lost shows up, and he mows down an entire field of infected with a helicopter's rotor blade. This is a great movie. And Jeremy Renner is in it, and Rose Byrne is in it, and Idris Elba, hello. I guess I'm supposed to feel pedestrian in some way that my favorite is the popcorn-munching all-star cast that actually looks like a movie, and not Danny Boyle's home movies of Halloween that one year. 28 Weeks Later ends with what apparently was a loose end that needed to be dealt with immediately in the new film. Right before the credits roll, there are shots of the infected emerging from the metro in Paris and racing toward the Eiffel Tower. Thus, in the opening of 28 Years Later, we're told in an opening scrawl that the virus has been eradicated from mainland Europe. That keeps the action in Great Britain, which was a concern of Alex Garland and Danny Boyle when they returned, which is great. Romero's films owe as much to Pittsburgh as his imagination, so yee-haw. Keep that film series at home. But that wasn't the only loose thread that film left behind. The climax involves the firebombing of London and the overall cooking of everyone still living in the UK. So where's everyone else coming from? Oh hell, let's get to it. This is 28 Years Later.
Sit here. Sit down, please.
Seven, 6, 11, 5, 9 and 20 miles today, 4, 11, 17, 32 the day before. Boot, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. Don't look at what's in front of you. Boot, 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 moving up and down again. Men go mad with watching them. There's no discharge in the war.
Once you walk onto that mainland, there's no rescues.
There are many kinds of death. Infected and non-infected.
Do not move.
You know, I feel he's a bit young.
He's ready. Day of judgment.
If your eyes drop, they will get the top of you. Boom, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the wall. Try to think of something different. Oh, my God, keep me from going lunatic. Boom, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the wall. 7, 6, 11, 5, 4, 17, 32 the day before.
Zombie movies only work when it's in the initial days of the outbreak. Maybe a year or two later, everything else is a Western. Or Mad Max with insane cannibals instead of biker gangs. 3 decades on, this is a post-apocalypse movie, and we're given what appears to be the only viable community left. They've taken up residence on a tidal island off the coast, which can only be accessed by a causeway that only appears during low tide. The rest of the time, the current is so swift there's no navigating. There's just a quick trip out to the open ocean. Here, we're introduced to Jamie, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. Craven? That's right, Craven. And his 12-year-old son, Spike, played by the fucking revelation that is Alfie Williams. Jamie's wife, Isla, that's Island in Spanish, y'all, is played by Jodie Comer. She was the only good thing in that fucking horrible Ryan Reynolds video game movie Free Guy. Actually, there's one other good thing in that movie. At the end, when Ryan Reynolds is fighting a roided-up version of himself, they're fighting on Revere Beach, which is my hometown. Anyway, Isla is laid up with horrible migraines most of the time. She's sick and deteriorating. As part of a coming-of-age ritual, Jamie takes Spike to the mainland to kill his first infected and to learn just what's going on over there. What's going on is fucking horrifying. Given 3 decades to evolve, the infected have separated into 3 distinct categories. Slow, bloated, and usually blind creatures that crawl along the ground, feeding on insects and earthworms. There's the regular old infected we've come to know and love, and then there's the alphas, apparently stronger and more intelligent and able to marshal the other infected. And they love ripping off heads, with spine. Oh, and everyone's naked. Every goddamn crazy in England is butt naked. Butt naked? Buck naked. I've heard both. What do you think? FatherMalone71@gmail.com. That's where all the zombie dong talk is coming from, folks. The Alpha, nicknamed Samson, is a huge man with a huge cock. He puts Dr. Manhattan to shame. As Sister Amatis, my 8th grade teacher at Immaculate Conception School, used to glower at us, "You've seen it, okay? Get over it." Her name was Amatis, but there was no love in her. The film is a solid 2 hours, with the first hour being Jamie and Spike and their adventures to and from the mainland. But when Spike discovers that a doctor is alive on the mainland, he makes the decision to take his mother and seek him out and get the medical attention that she needs. Along the way, they encounter a Swedish NATO soldier who's found himself stranded, and an infected woman pregnant with a normal child. And the doctor himself, played by Ralph Fiennes. They may as well have named him Dr. Romero, given that George made no secret that his allegiance in the Dead films was with the zombies. So too, Ralph Fiennes' Dr. Kelson sees no difference between the human and the infected, and treats them both with equal respect. Now, if you've heard anything about this movie, it's the giant dick. And the moment at the end, which we'll talk about in spoilers. But the other thing, the major thing, is the shift in tone. While the latter half of the movie doesn't skimp on frightening, at times skin-crawling scenarios, it settles quite heavily into a sense of mourning and sometimes sorrow. It's a far more contemplative film than either of the previous entries. There's also a distinct flavor of spiritualism, at times bordering on the supernatural. I think if that sudden shift in gears from thrill ride to mausoleum walking tour is too much for you to bear, then the movie won't have much for you at all. But I imagine those complaining are the ones that didn't have any trouble when the bank-robbing, family-kidnapping Gecko brothers ended up beset by vampires at the Titty Twister. Here's the thing. Overall, I'm of 2 minds on this film. If I didn't know there was a sequel already filmed and scheduled to come out in January of 2026, I think this movie would be a failure. If it were going to be a standalone flick, then it should have been Spike and Isla from the start, so we can fully know her and him and their relationship. As it is, we're given half a movie with her, and half a movie setting up something else entirely. It does tell a complete story. It is ultimately a coming-of-age film, and in that regard, it not only succeeds, it soars. But there was so much place-setting going on for what is obviously the future adventures on the mainland that, if you're judging this movie on its own, it's a big old failure. So, we're left in the unenviable position of The Matrix Reloaded. Was it good? I don't know. I think so. Maybe. I'll let you know when Revolutions comes out. Nope. Garbage. I have higher hopes with the continued involvement of Alex Garland that 28 years later, The Bone Temple will not only bolster what the first movie had been laying down, but will give everyone exactly what they were looking for. Here is where to turn off the show if you don't want anything spoiled. You're not going to miss anything. I'll just give out the email address and beg you for money. But if you stay, I'm going to spoil the fuck out of everything. You need a countdown? Fuck that. Spoilers, y'all. That pregnant, infected girl gives birth. They tote the kid around, keeping it safe from the infected and away from Samson, even though it's totally fucking clear that it's Samson's kid. Alpha male with a giant prick. What else am I supposed to think? Oh, and Isla has inoperable cancer and commits suicide. It's awful. In a good way. At the end, Spike drops the baby off at the island, like a cartoon from the 1940s, and then he goes off adventuring. Now, here's the bonkers, crazy, mental bullshit at the end. Spike is being chased down by a horde of infected when he's befriended by a group of young adults, all dressed identically, with dyed white, blonde, gross hair. And they fucking parkour and ninja the fuck out of the infected, with all the camera work of a kung fu flick. And I mean a Sammo Hung Chinese opera kung fu flick. You can actually hear the earlier tonal shift of the movie say out loud, "Wow, I didn't see that coming." And I fucking loved it. I keep thinking about it, turning it over and over in my head. That crazy bit of potential non sequitur nonsense at the end of a contemplation of death and grief was such a fucking big swing. And for me, it absolutely connected. But let me explain why. I'm not just some fanatic for physical comedy or action. Like 28 weeks later, 28 years later begins at the start of the outbreak, 2003. We're shown the Crystal family in the Scottish Highlands. The children are gathered around watching Teletubbies when the infected invade. Jimmy Crystal, no older than Spike, escapes and finds his way to the local church where his father is a vicar who's preaching the Day of Atonement. He gives Jimmy a crucifix and Jimmy escapes. And it's all horrifying, and it's great. And that is the last we see of Jimmy. Until that final sequence. The leader of the parkour gang of badly dressed ninjas is Jimmy, which means that that boy has lived on the mainland and survived for 28 years. I love a bookend, particularly when it doesn't announce itself. So I think on that level, this ending is a win. But further, listen, Jimmy Savile. He was a television personality and presenter on the BBC. He hosted Top of the Pops and a show called Jim'll Fix It, which had children write in with a wish, and then they'd try to make that wish happen. That show was wildly popular and ran for nearly 20 years. The man was beloved for his charity work and was generally seen as a top-shelf eccentric. The gang, at the end, are styled exactly like Jimmy Savile. They are, in fact, a gang known as the Jimmies. During an earlier scene, one of the infected can be glimpsed with a Jimmy branded into its skin, so who knows what these crazies are up to? But it begs a couple of important questions. See, after his death in 2011, it came to light that Savile was a fucking horrendous sexual predator, with some 450 confirmed cases, and suspected as high as 1,000, almost exclusively children of both genders. It is absolutely mind-boggling, the sheer volume. Now, here's the question. Those allegations didn't come to light until 2011, meaning in 2003, you'd have had no idea. At the time, as a kid, Savile would be a hero. So is that what's happening? Is this misguided idolization and cult-like devotion to a child's fantasy? Or is there a much darker option, that Jimmy Crystal is one of Savile's victims, and that the hero worship is just as fucking twisted as the man himself? Either way, my mind is in ruins at the potential. I mentioned we're in a Matrix Reloaded wait-and-see situation, and there are some questions I have that I assume will be addressed, but if not, see Matrix Revolutions. The sequels could retroactively cancel out any goodwill that 28 years later has engendered. No alpha has figured out there's an entire island of people, and if you just wait till the tide is out, you and an army can just go get them? In 28 years. To quote Jack Burton, I'm supposed to buy this shit? 2,000 years, you can't find one broad to fit the bill? Come on, Dave, you must be doing something seriously wrong. Also, NATO is patrolling the island because, like the New York Maximum Security Penitentiary, or the island of Los Angeles for that matter, once you go in, you don't come out. Nothing comes off the island. Okay, for 30 years? No other nation has looked at this prime real estate? The UK, which is now completely overgrown with forests and woodland and all this natural resources, and they thought, yeah, we'll just leave it abandoned. We won't just hover in helicopters with miniguns and eradicate the problem. Sure. Also, there's a pretty huge leap that amounts to the equivalent of conventional amnesia, where Isla's condition allows her to basically be demented and out of it when the plot needs her to be. It's a little too convenient and on occasion borders on that worst instinct of Stephen King, making the mystic out of the mentally challenged. Laws, yes, but that's a quibble. Less a quibble is the virulence of the rage infection in the first film and sequel. Just a drop of liquid, a spray from the infected, will have you vomiting blood in moments. You all remember Brendan Gleeson and that motherfucking bird? Only the Ralph Fiennes character makes an overture toward protection from the virus. Everyone else is just blithely traipsing through the countryside. At one point, an infected gets killed and a spray of blood splatters on Isla's forehead, and Spike just wipes it away. Yeah, I'm sure it didn't get in anywhere. I'm sure over the decades the virus has lessened in intensity or something. We'll see. I have faith in Alex Garland. I know he had a trilogy of Judge Dredd movies planned that involved the Cursed Earth and then Judge Death, so he's no stranger to strategizing sagas. I'm sure my concerns will be allayed, and plus there's the promise of Cillian Murphy's return, so things are looking up, as much as they can on an island with murderous lunatics and a pedophile-worshipping parkour gang and giant zombie dongs. I heard an interview with Alex Garland that I found pretty heartening. Maybe not hopeful, but at least it engendered a sense of solidarity. He was speaking about the general feeling about those in power up until about 20 years ago. He said it always seemed, through good or ill, that they were nothing if not progressive in their ideas and policies. It was always with an eye toward the future, toward keeping a nation strong by carrying it forward. And then, all of a sudden, that eye was turned back, and there was a yearning for the past. It started wistful and got aggressive, rage-filled, if you will. I think they were there for the spark of that, and I hope they're there for the final tamping down of the ashes. I assume Garland has a plan for a new society at the end of this series. For once, I hope these films are prescient. That is going to be the Roundup, suckers. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm killing myself doing these twice a week and a full-time job. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying I clearly love you. And you should love me too, by giving this show 5 stars and thumbs up. It's how the algorithm gets us new listeners. Another way is by you telling them, say, hey man, you like zombies? Cool. You know who else does? Father Malone. And Ripley Jean. Sorry, baby. Next week is all you. And this week and every week is all you, Midnight viewers. Till next time, a peace from the post-apocalypse.
Mr. Harris.
Yeah.
We found your kids.
Oh, thank God, thank you so much.
We found your wife, too.
So what do you two think you're playing at?
You said you saw her die.
What?
You said you saw her die.
I didn't say that.
You did. You said you saw her die. You did.
Baby, I didn't use those words. But this is... I don't know, I mean, it's confusing, you know? It's very hard for you to imagine, you know? It's too hard to explain.
Try to explain it, Dad. Try!
Try what you want me to say. I thought I saw Mum... die. I wouldn't have told you that. I was sure. Look, guys, I'm not sure what's happening here. But it's good. Okay? That's the point. Mum's alive.
I want to see her!
Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.